Sexual abuse, a very big and serious problem, yet people are not talking about it. So let's talk about it today. When my kids were little, we just loved story time. One night, as I read to them about Berenstain Bears talking about strangers and stranger danger, I suddenly felt sick to my gut because I realized that we teach our kids the dangers out there somewhere with strangers lurking around when the home can be the most dangerous place for most kids who've experienced sexual abuse. Statistically speaking, 95% of victims know their abuser, only 2% involve a complete stranger. 30 to 40% of victims are assaulted by a family member, and in that case, the average age of sexual assault is 9 years when it involves a family member versus 12 years of age for non family members. How sad is that? 64% of reported offenses take place in the child's home, and 95% of cases go unreported to the authorities. So, why exactly is there secrecy? Let's look at it from the child's perspective. A child's biological response may have been confusing to them because of how our senses are programmed, so it turns into an embarrassing secret. Understanding that makes a big difference. You know, if I show you something, your eyes are working, whether you want to see it or not, you're going to see it. I make you taste something, whether you want to taste it or not. If your taste buds work, you're going to taste it. So when people are abused, a lot of the times the touch itself can feel pleasurable, but it is so confusing to the person. They don't understand, they can't reconcile it from the fact that it was abusive, that it was terrible, that they didn't want it. And that's a big piece that helps a lot of people experience freedom and not be caught up in it. And I just say, think about guys that struggle with, for instance, erectile dysfunction. That's not what they want, but there's a disconnect between the mind and the body. And so it is in this situation. So if there's nothing else I get across, that's an important one. Next one, the perp may have been someone who, is the only person who paid attention to this poor neglected child. Perps are very carefully at selecting those, so they may confuse pain and love, which is similar to the Stockholm Syndrome, where people, they seek attachment during danger, and they end up clinging to whomsoever may be there, even it happens to be the person that's causing them the pain. Understanding that can bring relief. A child may have been afraid of breaking up their family. Once the onus is off them, they can open up with conversations. Otherwise, they're terrified that the family will break up and they'll be at fault. A child may have been threatened. If you speak up, you'll get into trouble. Having permission to speak with a therapist unlocks that healing. It's very liberating. A child may have been afraid of not being believed. That's a big one. They're told, no, who are people going to believe, you or I? When you can validate them, they can open up and you release that dialogue that's necessary for healing. So what are some of the consequences of sexual child abuse? Sex can become linked with sexual abuse, creating an unhealthy erotic template. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Sexual abuse can lead to trauma reenactment, to subconsciously minimize things because you're replacing inescapability with being in control, to neutralize, mentally rehearsing, and rewrite a happy ending. Sexual abuse images can create shame and may turn the survivor off sex. So when people say, every time I start to have sex, I see a parent, I see a sibling, so I can't go there. Sexual abuse may lead to promiscuity because survivors can feel that sex is the only thing of value that they have to offer. So it can become a currency for validation, acceptance, affection, love. And they end up ensuring that there's a lack of rejection by providing this because that also ensures that their abandonment doesn't kick in. Survivors may see themselves as servicers, which leads to performance versus pleasure-based sex, and this makes them susceptible to future abuse, since they learn to accept objectification, which can also lead to self-blame if sex isn't enjoyable to the other party. We can see sexual dysfunctions, vaginismus, dyspareunia, erectile dysfunction, all of which can cause intimacy problems and end up impacting the relationship. Now, some adult sexual myths and consequences. Lots of times people say, well, Victim must have provoked the abuse by how they were dressed or how they were behaving. This takes the onus off the abuser and puts it on the abused, when no means no, no questions asked. Another thing people say is it is an assault if the person didn't fight back or get injured. You know what? The most common response is freezing, not fight or flight. People say if it really happened, the victim should be able to recount every detail. But shock, fear, and distress can impair memory. And severe traumatization can actually cause dissociation, total disconnect. Some people say if this assault involves a partner that the victim had sex with previously, it doesn't count. Every sexual act with any and every individual requires consent. Some people think that men and boys can't get sexually assaulted, whereas 1 in 6 males has experienced some form of sexual violence, but it's much harder for them to report because of stereotypes and societal opinions. Relational consequences of sexual abuse. Becoming turned off by sex due to shame. We should be able to own it and enjoy it, but people get turned off. Shutting down due to guilt and self-blame. Don't need to blame yourself after what we just talked about. Low self-esteem leading to withdrawal. Body image issues leading to hiding or guarding. Dissociation causing spectating and inability to be present and really connect and enjoy that closeness, because it's just like you're watching it happening but you're not part of it. Depression and anxiety causing relationship issues. Excessive drug and alcohol use challenging the relationship. Sexual dysfunctions like we talked about, vaginismus, dyspareunia, erectile dysfunction, and these of course cause serious intimacy problems. Sex addiction, which can destroy relationships. Trust issues, making emotional intimacy nearly impossible. The good news is we don't have to be victims. Our bodies, they belong to us, so we can reclaim them instead of being held hostage by our trauma. We can own them and enjoy them the way that we were meant to enjoy them. We can just love our bodies. They did nothing wrong. It's never the child's or the victim's fault, even if it felt pleasurable. We have the right to enjoy sex on our own terms, for our own sake. We have the right to feel safe, so we should create safety, internal and external, and never feel afraid. If any of what we've talked about has reached your heart, maybe it got rid of some of the confusion that you've been carrying or the pain. There is no shame in reaching out. If anything, you'll be able to release that shame and heal. And don't let anything hold you hostage. Don't let trauma live rent-free in here, or here.